Chosen ones, welcome. You didn't stumble here by accident. You've survived storms they swore would drown you. You've carried weights no one even saw. And somehow, you still showed up glowing. That alone sets you apart. You are not just here to watch. You are here because something inside you already knows. You are the kind of person they underestimated, and the kind of person they'll never forget. This is your reminder. The moves you make today echo far beyond the moment. Every time you refuse to shrink, every time you rise without clapping back, every time you walk away with your head high, you're not just surviving, you're rewriting the game. They may call you too much, too bold, too unstoppable, but that's because you are everything they can't control. And tonight, this is about you owning that completely. So take up space. Feel the weight of your worth. And remember, you don't need permission to shine. Welcome to the moment they'll replay for the rest of their lives. Welcome to your divine checkmate. Looking for purpose and peace? Hit subscribe and start the journey. Some anticipate a clash, expecting raised voices, shattered calm, and a spectacle of fury. They set their scene, rehearsing accusations, waiting for the moment when composure slips so they can point and say, "That's the truth of them." But the storm they forecast never arrives. The invitation to conflict goes unanswered, not from fear, but from clarity. The entire contest is no longer relevant, and that quiet refusal unsettles them more than any retaliation could. It isn't simply a refusal to engage. It's an understanding of the theater itself, an elaborate illusion. The exaggerated grief, the rehearsed outrage, the counterfeit allegiance, all visible now, unconvincing. Instead of feeding those illusions, the focus turns inward, toward progress. While schemes are crafted to provoke collapse, strategies are shaped to dissolve old patterns. And when the pivotal moment comes, no outburst breaks the silence. Instead, there is an unmistakable rising, subtle yet undeniable. That ascent is the decisive move. Not a deafening blow, but a graceful departure that leaves grasping hands suspended in emptiness. Victory needs no vengeance to announce itself. It becomes evident in the contrast between stillness and frenzy. Where there was a stage set for drama, there's only absence. And that absence resonates more powerfully than any confrontation could. They keep returning to the question, how does one undo someone who no longer participates? The answer is, you can't. And so the memory of that quiet departure lingers, sharper than any argument. They longed for conflict to justify their bitterness, but what they received was silence, wrapped in a quiet sort of triumph. They are left watching, stuck in their familiar loops, while growth and healing move steadily away from them. It is not just a matter of winning the game, but leaving it behind entirely, at a level they never imagined, never prepared to face. This is not an escape, it is a revelation. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. There is no need to unmask anyone forcefully, no parade of proof, no desperate plea for witnesses. The truth is left alone, and slowly it begins to reveal what it always carried. At first, there is confidence, even arrogance, a belief that lies hold the advantage. But those illusions decay under the weight of their own contradictions. Words twisted, stories reshaped, accusations hurled, all of it designed to incite panic. Yet nothing comes. The understanding that time sharpens truth remains quiet but steadfast. Falsehoods have a way of collapsing under their own pressure. No audience is necessary, no retaliation required. The calm presence of reality begins to eclipse the manufactured noise. Gradually, inconsistencies surface, dissonance becomes apparent. Their accounts fracture without a single interruption, not because they are exposed, but because the act cannot sustain itself. No rage meets their slander. No defense interrupts their theater. Only stillness that grows louder by the day. It isn't anger that eats at them, but embarrassment, the bitter taste of having been undone by patience. Nothing breaks form, nothing needs to. That restraint, that focus, it is a quiet force. The truth works quietly while the self keeps moving forward. Existence itself becomes the argument they can't win. The growing disparity between their narrative and reality becomes unignorable. Where lies wilt, authenticity endures. Where noise falters, peace remains. There's no need to dig or drag. Everything false begins to collapse of its own accord. They had counted on silence meaning defeat, but silence was wisdom all along. And now, what unsettles them most is not what was said, but what was withheld. Left to their own unraveling, the truth fills the empty spaces they tried to control, dismantling everything false one breath at a time. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. Some believe they can dictate the script, that a person's essence is a puppet they can pose for their convenience, a tale they can retell as they please, a name they can drop into every corner to inflate themselves. But what truly unsettles them is when the story walks away and takes the meaning with it. Departure happens, but it does not happen quietly. The narrative they tried to cage begins to dissolve in their hands as its rightful owner reclaims it. The picture they painted, fragile, erratic, counterfeit, collapses the moment independence shines through. Growth rearranges the whole scene. Suddenly, whispers turn to puzzled stares, because the person thriving in plain sight no longer fits the caricature they rehearsed. Without the intended reaction, the spectacle falters. Without fuel, the fire chokes itself out. What unsettles them most is not an accusation hurled back, but the undeniable proof written in action and calm. The past no longer serves them. They counted on retelling someone else's wounds, recycling a false portrait to keep themselves relevant. But the role is refused, the script abandoned, the stage left behind. There is no longer a character to defame, because the real person no longer resembles the fiction. Even as they cling to stale stories and parade broken echoes of what once was, the silence around them grows heavy. Those watching stop believing the old lines. Their narrative unravels because it cannot adapt to reality, and reality stands unapologetic, unbothered, and undeniable. What haunts them is not just the loss of someone, but the collapse of the lie they built around them. When the truth leaves, so does their control, and no amount of talking can bring it back. They claim to know the whole story, convinced that their version of someone will stand forever. They gossip with certainty, embellish with flair, and sprinkle disdain with confidence, believing the image they painted will outlast any change. But something happens that they cannot predict. The subject of their rumors moves too quickly for the falsehoods to keep pace. Transformation keeps outstripping the narrative. While words circle in stagnant patterns, reality keeps unfolding, and the gap between what is said and what is seen grows impossible to ignore. Those who listen start noticing. The old labels no longer fit the person standing before them. Stronger, steadier, untethered from the accusations. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. That dissonance becomes their undoing. The stories that once sounded convincing now feel brittle and absurd, exposed by the contrast of what actually exists. No defensiveness is required. No protest interrupts their chatter. Progress itself becomes the quiet rebuttal they never prepared for. They keep trying to pin down an outdated reflection, but the mirror has already been shattered and rebuilt into something unrecognizable. Their persistence to keep retelling the same tired myths only leaves them looking desperate and left behind. As the one they targeted continues to grow, the audience begins to turn away, bored by the repetitive bitterness. The cruelest irony is that to revise the tale would mean admitting it was false all along. So they remain stuck in a fiction no one believes anymore, humiliated not by resistance, but by the simple fact that life itself has already written a better ending than they ever could. Some only feel tall when others stay small. They depend on the cracks in someone else to hold themselves upright. As long as wounds remain open, they can drape themselves in roles that suit their needs. Hero, victim, martyr, whichever earns them sympathy or applause. Each time strength begins to surface, they scramble to undo it. Subtle digs, carefully placed doubts, quiet sabotage. Not out of love, but out of fear of losing the control they feed on. What they never predict is that recovery doesn't arrive with fanfare, but with determination, so steady they can't measure it. There's no announcement, no declaration, only silence. But this silence isn't absence, It's transformation. In that stillness, something unshakable takes shape. Pieces reassemble not into what was, but into something entirely new, resilient, radiant, untouchable. And that quiet restoration unmasks everything. It shows plainly what was never visible before, that the harm was never justified, that the pain was never deserved. What they cannot stand is the way healing removes their excuse, breaks their illusion, and reflects their own intentions back at them. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. They thought pain would keep someone chained to them, but healing severs those ties. What they can't bear isn't just the loss of influence. It's realizing they never had it at all. Now, nothing they say can cover the fact that the one they tried to break didn't just recover. They became someone they can't reach, someone who shines where they once stumbled. And what remains louder than the silence is their own discomfort echoing in the space they can no longer occupy. They designed the situation to provoke, laying traps meant to draw out fury, hoping for an outburst they can brand as proof of weakness. Each slight, each betrayal, each maneuver crafted to elicit the reaction they've already scripted. But the expected explosion never comes. Instead, the energy meant to destroy gets redirected elsewhere, where it can't be touched. Every jab becomes a brick in something stronger. Without words, without spectacle, a quiet kind of construction begins. There's no rage in the response, only a quiet resolve that shapes pain into direction and injury into purpose. No time is wasted pleading with those determined not to listen. Instead, time is spent becoming unrecognizable to those who underestimated what was possible. The silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. Results begin to speak, clear and undeniable, dwarfing the noise meant to drown them out. What was meant to weaken instead tempers. What was intended to destroy instead distills. And while others cheer for a downfall they think they've engineered, they don't see what's happening beyond their reach. Strength growing quietly, impossible to stop. By the time the rebuilding is finished, it's not just survival they witness, it's reinvention. Not through bitterness, not by mirroring what was done, but by abandoning the fight entirely and turning that energy into something far beyond their imagination. The proof arrives, not in words, but in the unshakable calm that follows. They're left with nothing but the realization that they unknowingly shaped the very thing they sought to ruin, and that truth humbles them more than any confrontation ever could. Some depend entirely on being noticed, not for resolution, not for understanding, but for the rush of being at the center of someone else's focus. Their every move is calculated to keep the connection alive, even if it's toxic. Each slight, each provocation, each underhanded jab is crafted to keep emotions tangled around them. The more energy they extract, the more important they feel, but the expected reaction never arrives. No outburst, no desperate explanation, no chase for closure. The attention they crave is withheld, and with it, their illusion of power begins to crack. Without an audience, the whole performance collapses. The lights dim. The curtain falls. The noise fades into nothing. That absence grows louder than any confrontation ever could. The platform they stood on vanishes as their relevance disintegrates. The stories they spin, once gripping, now fall flat because the person they describe no longer exists. Without the emotional tug-of-war, they are left repeating lines no one listens to, circling the same empty stage. Meanwhile, growth continues, undisturbed. Reality overtakes rumor. The quiet dismantling of their influence becomes the truest consequence. Not revenge, not punishment, just a quiet unraveling as their sense of self withers without the attention it feeds on. Their words lose weight. Their presence loses meaning. And in the end, the drama they tried to sustain suffocates in its own silence, while what remains stands untouched, rising beyond reach. Some believe their misdeeds vanish if no one bears witness, that what happens behind closed doors can be buried forever. They inflict harm with steady hands, assuming secrecy shields them. Betrayal seeps through their smiles. They cloak cruelty in charm, convinced that what's hidden carries no consequence. What they cannot predict is that even unspoken injustice leaves a mark too deep to erase. The very harm they hope will destroy becomes the soil from which something unshakable grows. What they hoped would remain buried emerges instead, changed, elevated, impossible to ignore. The pain they inflict becomes the backdrop for a return so undeniable it unsettles them to their core. No longer confined to whispers, the story they tried to control unravels in ways they cannot stop. Their actions, once shrouded, are reflected back to them through the quiet, steady glow of the one they tried to dim. There is no bitterness in the return, no retaliation, no spectacle, only undeniable evidence that what was meant to break has instead been reforged. What was intended as ruin becomes a testament. No matter how much they deny or disguise it, the contrast remains visible to all. Every step forward becomes a quiet judgment they can't evade. The transformation itself becomes the loudest answer, not through anger, but through resilience, presence, and peace. They wanted collapse to prove them right. Instead, they are confronted with something far more haunting, a restoration they cannot undo, a strength they cannot explain, and a silent proof that what was done in darkness was never unseen. Some rely on others staying predictable, locked into the mold they crafted, quiet enough not to threaten it, loyal enough to keep carrying the burden, small enough to leave their illusion intact. They depend on compliance because it props up the identity they project. But when the expected obedience ends, so does their illusion of stability. There's no shouting, no dramatic rebellion, just a refusal to keep shrinking to fit their script. That choice doesn't just change one dynamic. It exposes the hollowness of the whole performance. Their confidence wasn't real. It rested on someone else's silence. Their kindness only looked convincing because someone else swallowed the hurt. Their wisdom only rang true because someone else muted their own knowing. Step back, and suddenly their shine fades. Without the scaffolding they leaned on, the cracks become too visible to ignore. What follows is panic. They scramble to reconstruct their act, searching for new audiences, fresh distractions, someone else to play the role you abandoned. But it never lands the same way again. The charm falters, the stories fall flat, and people notice what was always lurking beneath. The facade needs a participant to sustain it. Without you, it collapses into nothing more than an empty performance. The irony cuts deeper than they expect. The strength they claimed as their own was never theirs. And when you stop holding the weight of their narrative, the truth rushes in. They weren't holding you up. You were holding them together all along. Some are certain they've already written the final word about someone, convinced they know who you are, certain they can shrink you down to a single choice, a single moment, a single weakness. They repeat it loudly, weaving it into rooms you're not even in, making you the lesson, the example, the mistake. But what they don't account for is that growth doesn't consult their story before arriving. Every step you take away from what they predicted becomes a quiet contradiction, unraveling their assumptions thread by thread. You don't just recover, you evolve in ways they can't keep up with, disproving them without saying a word. Every gain, every kind word, every open door becomes a quiet verdict against the false version of you they tried to sell. The sting for them isn't just that you rise, it's that you rise in full view of everyone they tried to convince otherwise. You never have to retaliate. You just keep moving, and each level you reach widens the gap between their words and your reality. Their story starts to sound brittle, out of place, even absurd, because you've already outlived it. What unsettles them most is that every time your name is spoken in admiration, it forces them to confront how wrong they were. You don't just grow beyond their limits. You turn their certainty into their discomfort. Your presence becomes a quiet mirror, reflecting their failure to see you clearly. They spoke with confidence. They were wrong. And that realization echoes louder than anything you ever need to say. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. Some spend their energy crafting your downfall, not just wishing for cracks, but actively engineering them. Some are blatant, weaving stories and spreading doubt in the open. Others move quietly, hiding malice behind concern, plotting under the guise of care. They pour their effort into sending harm your way, convinced it will stick. But what they cannot comprehend is the protection woven around you, something beyond what they account for. It is not luck. It is not chance. It is something deeper, something beyond their reach. So when they launch their plans, what they fail to see is that they've also triggered something they do not understand, something that doesn't just block their intent, but reflects it back. What was aimed at you does not disappear. It turns, slowly at first, then all at once, and it lands where it came from, unraveling their own peace, shattering their own plans, closing their own doors. Not because you retaliate, but because their actions contain their own undoing. The weight of what they send out circles back multiplied, scattering their lives before they realize what's happening. That realization cuts sharper than guilt. It's the moment they see the pattern, too precise to deny. Everything begins to fracture after they come for you. And they know it. They know the consequences they mocked are real, that you were never unguarded. They discover too late that their attacks only hollow out their own path. And now they carry the discomfort of knowing the harm they wished has found its way home. Louder, heavier, impossible to ignore. Some go out of their way to tear apart what they can't understand, dismissing the way you move, ridiculing how you grow, mocking your voice every chance they get. They paint you as foolish for daring to stand out, exaggerating every step so others will doubt you too. But all the while, in the shadows they pretend not to watch, they begin borrowing from the very path they condemned. Little by little, the same words they laughed at slip into their own mouths. The same habits they called silly start showing up in how they carry themselves. The tone they once scoffed at shapes their own presence. What they cannot admit, even to themselves, is that they've been tracing your outline in secret. It is not admiration. It is not celebration. It is an internal conflict that eats away quietly. Every time they mirror you, they feel the sting of knowing they tried to bury what they now attempt to embody. And here lies the contradiction they can't escape. Every move they replicate is a reminder they never had the vision to create it first. They want what you've built without walking what you've endured, hoping that copying the surface can recreate the depth. But the energy they're chasing cannot be imitated. It comes from alignment they don't possess. They study you while pretending you're invisible, piecing together fragments of your journey to disguise as their own. But what they construct is hollow. They carry your reflection as if it's theirs, yet even that reminds them of how much they lack the substance behind it. They tried to reduce you to nothing, and now they're caught trying to become the very thing they swore would never matter. Some build their confidence on the illusion of control, measuring their worth by how much they can dictate the emotions and actions of others. Their version of connection is rooted in dominance, not understanding. When they cannot outdo you, they try to diminish you. When they cannot lead, they attempt to confine. Everything they do comes from a quiet panic, not just the fear they inflict, but the fear they conceal, the terror of being seen as far less than they pretend to be. But you do not respond on their terms. You do not raise your voice to match theirs, nor diminish yourself to soothe their insecurities. You do not scheme, plead, or retaliate. Instead, you settle into your own center, grounding yourself in what you know to be true, unshaken by their games. That quiet refusal to conform to their script tears through everything they construct. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. They cannot process that presence alone can be resistance, that clarity can undo what intimidation builds, that walking away from their chaos is a kind of rebellion they have no defense against. They try to pull you back into their storm, but you do not enter. You do not compete, justify, or perform. You simply move into the fullness of who you are becoming. And as you rise in that, the scaffolding of their influence begins to fall. What unnerves them most is realizing their tactics lose their grip without you participating. The hold they believed was permanent disintegrates without a struggle. Their authority cannot survive your evolution. Their pressure stops working the moment you refuse to bend to it. In the end, they are left standing in the ruins of what they thought was power, not because you attacked, but because you no longer believed. What haunts them now is not defeat at your hands, but the quiet truth. They never held anything over you at all. And you leave not just whole, but carrying their illusion in pieces, a reminder that your dignity never required their permission to stand intact.